Welcome back to Nerd Nation. So I have to apologize yesterday. We got off in a hurry with Babe. Unfortunately, we have other responsibilities and time ran out. So we are back really quick with a second episode with Babe. And let's just dive into it. So let's catch up to where we were yesterday. So yesterday we kind of heard your experience, and now we're getting into really what came about, how N.E.R.D came about, right?
Yeah. I remember us talking about kind of how we tested out solar. We found the only guy in Phoenix that would buy solar, at least that we could find. And so my construction manager for this other company knew the head of APS, the face of APS, a guy named Ed Fox. I'm like, listen.
Remind me the year of this again. So this is
in 2008 and early 2009. And so, I asked a favor. I said, please call. I think this energy deal is going to be a big deal. They just were like prepping this 2009 Clean Energy Reform Act. People were talking about how to save money on utilities. And so in my mind, I'm like, I can see that something is going to shake out with this energy deal. I think there's going to be changes in the industry. So this guy called and pulled a huge favor, and I went in and talked with Ed Fox.
The main guy.
Yeah, he's kind of like the face of APS. He wasn't like the CEO, if I recall. He was the face and kind of the spokesperson. And so I went in there, and I'm like, Ed, I do believe energy is a big deal. I've been trying to sell solar panels, and in some regard, it feels like there could be a conflict of interest, but most utilities don't want the conflict. They don't care about that small amount of power. There's other issues that they don't like solar for, that duck curve being one of those. You guys can look that up in the dojo. But so I said, Ed, I've got about 150 sales guys. I'm testing out energy, and solar's just not really working. And the housing market had just taken a freaking dive, and just you couldn't get loans for people. And he said something that shaped how I changed the company direction. He goes, Babe, I just want to give you some insight. He said, it will always be cheaper to reduce consumption before you attempt to produce new power.
And a light bulb went off.
Yeah, man, it was like this audible click in my brain. It was like, click. And I was like, oh, man, we need to reduce consumption before we produce new power. And that's when we came up with the concept of reduce before you produce. And so we shifted the model. We went entirely to reduction items. We did energy efficiency with insulation. We did air seal and duct seal. We did radiant barrier. We did, at the time, it was CFL light bulbs because LED was not reasonable at the time. We did programmable thermostats because smart thermostats hadn't come out yet. We did solar water heaters. We did all sorts of stuff, anything that would help reduce consumption. And we started to sell these efficiency packages, and sure enough, we got traction because these things weren't 30, 40, 50, 60,000 bucks at the time where you couldn't get loans for people.
So that's huge because you took your entire program, door knocking security program, right, and shifted it to this model, or
not yet.
Okay.
So, I'd like to say I'm that adventurous, but I am a little too calculated. So,
at least the Arizona market, though, correct?
I took a handful of people. Right. So we took about 7 or 8 good salespeople, and then we built a phone room behind that. We actually created leads, and we actually called our existing account base. And I had about 22,000 previous customers in Arizona. We called that customer base and said, hey, we want to make your house more efficient, save money utilities. And people loved it. So we actually converted about 11% of everybody that we got in contact with onto this new platform. These packages were like 8, 9, 10, 11,000 bucks, but they were awesome. They were efficient, efficiency and made your house comfortable, the whole deal.
So let's focus on that for just a minute. What was the interest rate back then?
Oh, so we put together that, I think I mentioned it last time, a deal with Wells Fargo and GE Capital, and they were 11.9, 12.9, 13.9. There was a group out of Florida that was 17.9% interest.
Wow.
It was like putting it on a credit card. In fact, that's how GE Capital, that's how Green Sky works today. And that's how it worked back then is they actually issue a credit card number and you run a credit card number for the loan.
Wow.
Yeah. So high interest rates back then.
See, and it's interesting because, and I loved your mindset. I mean, you were trying something new. This was a time when the job market was, tanking. Housing market was tanking. This was, again, something new. Interest rates weren't great. And you guys just blazed through it. I mean, you guys just did it.
Yeah. So we started to sell well. And, the silver lining in that is when you approach someone, you're like, hey, you're going to save, $17 a month. And they're like, wow, yes, I could really use that right now.
Yeah.
And so we ran that model out for about 6 or 7 months and kind of built the foundation. And we were prepping in 2009, I think, for another launch. And 3 or 4 days before the summer, we brought all the managers in and we said, hey, I think we've cracked the code on this energy deal. Instead, we had prep to go out to Northern California. And instead of going out to Northern California, do you guys want to stick around here and do energy? And everybody loved the idea.
So that was the big change.
Oh, but realize, we're in Arizona. We have people driving in from Southern California. We recruited from Texas, we have people coming down from Canada again and from Utah, all to be trained in 4 days. And I had been prepping to do this transition at some point in time, but one group said, we'll hedge the bet. We will do the office as intended, just in case. And the rest of the groups stuck there. So when they showed up for training, we made the announcement the first thing, and people they loved it. They were so
you
excited
didn't lose anyone over that?
No, in fact, the training was 3 days. And when we left the training 3 days later, we picked up another 12 people that weren't going to come out, but now we were doing energy, decided to come out.
Wow.
So we moved
That's cool.
About 125 people into it overnight. And full disclosure, man, like you start selling like that instantly, like we ran into issues just because we sold so well. And then the fulfillment side of that was painful to, fix. And, I think I made probably every mistake in the book you could make at that time. And we fixed it as we went and built that up.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then yesterday you talked about, there was one point where you guys actually brought in, so you have this game plan in your mind. And so you actually bring in a solar company, you buy a solar company and
yeah, there was a company that was struggling just with making payroll and doing the deal. And so we bought I bought the skeleton of that company, the core people and I didn't want to buy the entity itself for liability, but we essentially worked with the owner on buying out the core personnel and brought them in.
And the processes maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And just because I was inexperienced with solar still for PV, we had only installed that one job from the one guy we had found in Phoenix to buy. And so we layered in this group. And so we would make the home efficient and then we would call back later and upsell solar.
Oh, so it was a two-step process.
Two-step process. Yeah,
okay.
Two-step process. And so
were the same people calling selling, or you had a group selling reduction and a group selling solar?
We had different people. We had like a solar
division
expert, a photovoltaic expert come out and analyze the house and do the design. And again, we didn't have the tools we have today. It'd take a couple days to do just a basic design.
Okay. Yeah. So then what got you to... Then you got into consulting. We talked a little bit about that, but that was after this, correct?
Yeah. So we had that for a while and then got into consulting. A group out of Northern California had raised $250 million to grow out their dealer platform and an internal sales department. They hired me to come help deploy that capital and grow the dealer program. And I did that deal for 14 or 15 months, but stayed in energy.
Right.
Partly consulting for a group that was starting to get into commercial power. And so as my contract was winding down with this group, I remember going out to California to look this energy pitch. And they're like, can you come help us sell it? It was kind of the first big pitch they had. And the job was a $7.6 million deal.
It was a small job.
Just small potatoes. And so... we're driving out to California, and this guy we were working with named John, who was kind of leading the deal. I'm like, John, can you just walk me through? Because he kind of looks to me like, can you help me pitch the sale? And I'm like, absolutely. Can you give me the material? Let me review the material. And so I'm familiar with how this is going to work because I knew energy.
So this is happening while you're driving out to California.
I got the call the day before to go out, and I'm like, yeah, I'll rearrange my schedule, head out.
Yeah.
It was Friday morning. And he goes, oh, we don't have anything. We have a cash flow sheet. I'm like, can you say that again? You literally have nothing to show this group, and it's a $7.6 million sale. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I told him, I'm like, this isn't going to work, man. I'm not going to stamp my name behind a deal of this magnitude. And this was a company that made the plastic crates for Walmart. Big manufacturing company. Their average bill was $215,000 a month.
Utility bill,
yeah, from SoCal Edison, $215,000 a month.
Wow.
And so I tell John, I'm like, all right, just give me the info, shoot it to my email. I tethered my laptop to my phone and built out a presentation on the drive to meet with these people. And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I was kind of frustrated with it, and so I go out there and help pitch the deal, and at the end they're like, "Wow, sounds pretty good, actually. Yeah, we're gonna." And I ended up getting that contract later on and signing it, and then they lost the contract with Walmart, and so we postponed that deal, and ultimately it fell through, but we had actually sold the account, and it took some time to do that. But after we got back, I'm like, I'm not going to. I love commercial energy. I like the energy space. I'm not going to just consult and do this. I said, I'm going to put it into an entity and let's do this thing right. And that's when I created N.E.R.D Power.
All right. I get asked this a lot.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the name N.E.R.D Power?
Right.
I love it. It is probably one of the easiest engagement pieces, right? Like I love our name.
That is the exact thing I was going for.
Awesome.
I wanted people to ask about it. I
Yeah.
wanted people, and so again, and just to be totally open, I actually came up with N.E.R.D Power, and I thought, what can I make N.E.R.D stand for?
So N.E.R.D came before the natural.
N.E.R.D came before it, and I'm
wow.
I want people to see N.E.R.D Power, and as we grow this out, I want them to ask about it because that's a way to generate leads and generate business. Branding awareness is people will remember their name. And so
Brilliant.
We came up with N.E.R.D, and then I'm like, what can I make that? Okay, natural energy reduction design, because I still was a huge believer in this reduction before production model. It has changed my entire mindset about power.
But that's how you did commercial as well, right? I mean,
Did.
same model, same platform, just at a much bigger, well, there's different technologies for sure, but.
Yeah, so on that as an example, in that plastics company, we did an overhaul of their entire lighting infrastructure was planned for to convert everything to LEDs. And it's a couple $100,000 to convert this factory to LED lighting. We were going to bring in variable speed drives.
What would they save on that though? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. They saved over 25 years. So we were putting on a turbine, literally an engine on site to produce electrical power. And they were pulling all the heat off of that engine that it gives off and running that through a thermal load to melt the plastic before they did the final. So we preheated all the plastic when they went to melt it. And they saved over 25 years. I think it was like $28 million.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's a no-brainer, but there are more complications than that. It takes a lot to do those deals. Like the one we built at a company I'm not supposed to mention, Fortune 200 company. I won't say the name. Most people know, but the engine we put on site there, we did the same deal. We took the heat and did it into their boiler system. We did another system on a high school, and we took the heat off of that engine and we ran it through a chemical process called absorption cooling, which actually provides cold air from the waste heat of the engine.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool. So N.E.R.D Power was born. Mm-hmm. And you were still doing other things, kind of like the Elon Musk got your hand in a lot of different things, right? How did you meet Brian Tolman? Because Brian comes into the picture soon, right?
Yeah. So a buddy of mine named Tim knew Brian, and Tim was helping me sell some of these commercials. He was on with me on that plastics
On that
job.
California job?
Yeah. And so Tim stayed with the company for a little while he was transitioning anyway. into some other work. And he's like, hey, you got to meet this dude that's looking to do commercial accounts. Because at the time, Brian had been selling for Vivint, right?
Solar,
yeah. And Brian is, as everyone knows, a very, very intelligent human being,
and a great salesman.
But I mean, it's a rare find to find somebody that's really good on an ops side and operationally sound, intelligent, but also has the skill set to sell. And so Brian came in and he was going to sell commercial accounts with me. And we started, he started running these leads on commercial accounts. And then as we started to build up that side of the business, he's like, you got to meet this dude that also wants to sell commercial on the side. He's also selling for this company. And I meet this guy named Eric Thomas.
It was me.
And the best part about that story is I knew instantly that you would be good for the business, because when we sat down, if you remember, we sat down and I go, I know you. And you're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you knocked on my door 3 weeks ago and I kept your card, and I'm like, I'm going to recruit this guy at some point because I let you do your whole pitch. I'm like, this guy's actually pretty freaking good. And so I kept your card and I pulled the card out of my office drawer at that office we met at. And I'm like, you knocked on my door 3 weeks ago, man. And so you came in to sell commercial deals, and ultimately it was you that requested, like, hey, why don't we just do some residential on the side? Yeah, I hear really positive things about your old residential platform. Why don't you just open it up? And I'm like,
You're actually being nice here. This is actually a funny story, and I don't know if you remember it this way, but I actually was selling residential because I needed to make some money. So commercial, the thing about commercial is that it takes a long time to make money. So when I officially jumped in and left Vivint, I needed to make some money, and so you're like, okay, I'll do some residential for you. So I got a phone call, and you were right behind me. I got a phone call from someone, a referral in SRP, and I'm like, sorry, we can't do, solar in SRP. And you're like, yeah, we can. I was like, babe, let me tell you something. Let me explain how this works, because we cannot sell in SRP. And you're like, yeah, we can. It's like, babe, and you're like, well, let me explain something. And that's where you taught me the duck curve, and that's really for me when I truly started to understand the platform, right? The reduce before you produce. And lo and behold, we could sell in SRP, and that kind of became our bread and butter at first, because we were literally one of the only companies that figured it out, right? Mm-hmm. So it kind of happened by accident. Like, I really didn't think we could do it, and you're like, yes, we can. And
what's funny is I remember you told me, like, we'll just do it on the side a little bit. And I had the licensing, I had installers, I had people already, and we had an ops team that could support that. I'm like, all right, we'll just do it on the side. And then whatever, 3 or 4 months later, we have like 30 people selling. I'm like, Eric, you tricked me. No, so we, and then we all sat down. I remember this well. We sat down and we said, if we're going to do residential, let's do it right. And let's go for it. Like, let's do this. Because I love residential because of that time compression.
Yeah.
These commercial jobs that take 2 years to close or a year to close. Like, no surprise here. I've got a little bit of ADD, and I don't like waiting that time period. And so we decided to go all into resi, man. And that was kind of how we started building this thing out. You brought in Carl, and we started to build this team out.
And it went from there. So residential was never your initial plan with N.E.R.D Power then?
Not at the very beginning. I really was pretty excited about closing that challenge to go out and close a $3 or $5 or $10 million deal. Was exciting.
And just so everyone knows, we still do commercial accounts. Mm-hmm. And I think, truth be told, you do probably 90% of them. Like the smaller jobs, I think it's under $500,000. You'll let like a manager or someone.
Yeah. So if it's under $500,000, I don't generally get involved. Happy to go to it and help train and kind of walk through to get people on their feet. But Steve and Joe helps me with those a lot. And then anything over $500,000, I want to personally be involved in, because a small issue on a commercial job, if we miss something on resi, because everybody knows construction is tough. You drill into a roof, you open up a wall, you don't know all the time what you're going to get. And so you got to plan to have issues and fix those issues. There's part of our financial model that we have to build in a % of every sale to fix problems.
Right.
But on the commercial side, you have a problem, you got a problem. Easy example is on that high school we had to change the piping from a 3-inch pipe to a 4-inch pipe because the design team had it wrong. We had an outsourced design team on a very complicated project. That one change from 3-inch pipe to 4-inch pipe was $150,000.
Wow.
So you can't miss stuff on commercial, and not that I don't miss things, but just with some more experience, maybe I can catch some of those a little bit more.
And part of the problem is commercial just takes so long. There's just so much more involvement. For example, the Bartlett Lake that you're working on right now, we're over a year since the initial contact, right?
Probably closer to 2
years.
Stephen has worked on that job for close to 2 years and has gained trust, and we took a long time to design the system. Mm-hmm. I mean, we sold that system at the end of last year, and we don't start, we've actually installed the generator already. Cord and Aaron helped install that generator up on site there, but we don't put the panels on until January, meaning a full year later, because the design itself takes 2 months, and we got to get it all stamped and done, and it's very, very precise. It just takes time.
Cool. So we've kind of seen the beginning of N.E.R.D. Just really quick, we only have a few more minutes. Just tell me where you envision N.E.R.D. What's your 3, 5, and 10 year plan with N.E.R.D. Kind of putting you on the spot here, but I'd love everyone to kind of hear, the direction we're headed.
Yeah. So, I want to be really clear that I personally don't care about always being the biggest. I care about being really great. And so I don't personally feel like we need to be immediately in 25 states. We want to get really good at the states we're in and nail it before we scale it. And so over the next, let's call it 2 to 3 years, we will open up probably another 5 to 10 offices or more. And reality is we're capped only exclusively today by the leadership team. We want to develop leaders in this business. We are a human capital company. And so if we can develop leaders, we can grow and grow in an efficient and safe manner. So what people probably don't realize is every year they put out this list of the top installing companies in the country. And every year on that top 10 list, between 2 and 4 are out of business the next year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, size is not stability.
Right.
In fact, it's kind of the opposite. So we've taken time to grow this out, and we've grown it in a way to be a debt-free company. And I think there's less than, and I apologize, I don't mean to say that in a conceited manner, but that's what we've done controlled growth, and we've done smart business in that we want to grow this as a debt-free company, and less than 1% of companies can probably say that.
And even in the expansion, like, I know you have a game plan, and we've got some cities we're looking into, but we started looking into those cities months ago. Like, it's not oh, it sounds great, let's jump into Florida or wherever it may be. Like, there's a lot that goes into understanding utilities, understanding even the state incentives and stuff that we really dive into before you just make that decision. So
yeah, it's expensive to expand.
Yeah.
You have to grow and have the cash flow to support that expansion. And we are opening up the Midwest in January. I think most people probably have heard that, but we started planning that out 3 or 4 months ago.
Yep.
And so it takes time. We're gonna have 6 months of making sure that gets launched really well. And then that gives us a hub to expand in the Midwest. We will look at the East Coast probably at the end of 2022, maybe the beginning of 2023. And we have tried to create a nimble company. So everybody knows that solar is big because the ITC is big. If the ITC did not extend, 99% of solar companies would probably want to just close their doors and be done.
Yep.
But since we've got this efficiency reduction platform, today our jobs, 99% have solar. 1% have energy efficiency and high efficiency HVAC or some other product lineup. If we ended up having 25% with solar and the rest was energy efficiency, we have a scalable model still that's highly viable. And so we've and I know now the ITC looks like there's a potential extension of 10 years at 30% is what the latest infrastructure bill has it pegged at.
Nice. And Brian was on the phone all day yesterday talking to senators, and like we're trying to do our part, right? And kind of research and also help in any way we can. So that's actually really really important to understand. So you've set this company up to where, I mean, obviously there's a commercial division and a residential, but you're also basically stating that you've designed a company where if there's big market changes or big incentive changes, federal, the ITC, if that changes, like we're still going to be okay.
Yeah. The reality is changes don't put companies out of business. It's the inability to adapt that puts you out of business. So you have to stay nimble and you have to stay prepared to always adapt and change quickly.
And that's why you always say we're a human capital. I mean, that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, and I love energy. I love solar, but if somebody came out with a different product and we said, this actually makes a lot of sense, we could technically swap out products at any time. Solar and energy makes the most sense today, and it probably will for the foreseeable future, but we could technically bring in a new product if we needed to.
Awesome. Well, Babe, thank you very much. It's always interesting to hear those stories. I actually learned stuff today, so it was actually fun to sit down with you. So we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.